And we continue at 2:05 in the afternoon. Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show. Broadcasting live from the Morongo Casino Resort and Spa Living Room Studios, which today is in the suburbs of Fort Worth, Texas. And I've got to tell you, the temperature here is very different than the temperature over at Morongo, where I think you can still enjoy the pool. Here, if you jump in a pool, you're going to join that polar swimming group that you see every January swimming in the ocean when it's about, 20 below. Anyway, Mr. Randy Wang's at the sports desk in Culver City.
John, now that LaFonza Butler has been appointed and is a sitting member of the Senate, Barbara Lee, who is running for that seat, has realized she needs to rebrand herself, and this is what she's come up with.
Now, like many Californians, I know what it's like to live one paycheck to paycheck. I raised 2 little boys as a single mom on public assistance and food stamps.
I'm the welfare candidate.
Well, in Gavin Newsom's California, at some point, all of us will have our turn.
We're as dumb as we want to be.
800-222-KABC is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is a columnist at The Federalist and the author of the book Liberal Misery, available online at Amazon.com. You can follow him on Twitter at eScarry. Eddie Scarry, welcome.
Hi, John. The pleasure is all mine.
Well, thanks so much for stopping by. Let's start out with the big story, of course, which was the attack that happened in Israel by Hamas and Iran, I guess, in conjunction with one another. Horrific terrorist attacks, coordinated. Civilians were murdered. They were sexually abused. They were mutilated, set on fire, the whole thing. And as all of that played out, and as we saw the images on our television, we read about it in our newspapers, we saw everything on social media, the Democratic Socialists of America decided that they would go to some of the biggest cities in the country and have rallies this weekend in support of Hamas. They did it in New York. They did it in San Francisco. They did it in Seattle, and that's what I paid attention to, but I'm sure they did it other places too. What's interesting to me about this is that the DSA, while they're very politically radical, and they certainly are not what I would regard as being a mainstream organization, they do have many elected officials who serve in Congress or serve on big city councils or serve in state legislatures, who are candidates for all of these offices and more, who are proud members of the organization. And as I saw the images of their protests play out on television, I said to myself, if you are a member of that group, that should be a disqualifying characteristic for public office. But I'm not seeing the mainstream press report it that way. In fact, I'm not seeing the mainstream press putting any kind of pressure on these elected officials at all to renounce their membership in this group or explain why they support what Hamas did in Israel just a few days ago. Your thoughts?
I mean, there's like 3 different ways I can go with this, and I would love to have all the time in the world to do all 3. The one is, yes, let's take someone like Ilhan Omar. I know that there were others, the Minnesota rep, Democrat rep out of Minnesota. At this point, we know what we're getting. We know who has been voted into office. We know where their allegiances lie. Ilhan Omar was reflecting the same sentiment you saw if anyone was paying attention to social media, which if you weren't, God bless you. But they're just on there talking about how, at minimum, there should be a ceasefire and we should call for peace. Okay, so there's that. And then on the other side of the spectrum, they're saying, oh, well, no, this is all Israel's fault, and we completely hold Israel accountable. I think that I forget there was some student body at, I don't know if it was Yale or Harvard, that released a statement that said we completely hold Israel accountable for all of the violence that has taken place. Okay, so we've got that. You also have the media that always takes the wrong side of any. You can literally take any issue there is. The media will take the wrong side. When I say media, I mean the New York Times, the Washington Post, ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, CNN. All of them, they're all going to take the wrong side of this. Okay, but my issue on Israel is, and I will say, like, I have a life, so I did not spend every second of this weekend looking at what happened in Israel. I actually have a life. I went to brunch with friends. I saw people. So I'm speaking from the perspective of someone who did not spend all of my time looking at this. And yet I will say, what is the concern to me at this moment? And I'm interested if you have an answer. What is the concern to me when we have spent decades at this point? The U.S. has, and when I say the U.S., I mean the American taxpayer, decades giving money to Israel to prepare and deal with all of these happenstances as they arise, just like what happened over this weekend. So the idea that we're supposed to do something, what are we supposed to do? We give you money for these events. We prepare you for these events, and yet I keep hearing about, well, we don't have a Speaker of the House, so what are we supposed to do? And we can't help. This is what everything has been for. Otherwise, if we're supposed to jump in and take the wheel every single time one of these things happens, what do we give them money for? And if you have an answer, I welcome that answer.
Well, I think first of all, the world is much smaller than it used to be. It used to be in the old days, especially for us, because we have oceans on both sides of us, and we have two countries who we're relatively friendly with, in Canada and Mexico, on our borders. We're not like Israel, where we have people who want to kill us just over the border. So we were in a very different situation than the rest of the world. But now, because of technology, because of just the way the modern world works, the world is much smaller. And the argument that Hamas was making in Israel when they conducted these attacks, and the argument that their defenders are making here and making elsewhere, is that this is a part of fighting off colonization. And because they're anti-colonization, they believe in guerrilla tactics that includes terrorism and mutilating people and sexually abusing women and children and those sorts of things. And if they can get away with it there, they're taking this to the United States. They're taking this to France. They're taking this to England, because you can make that anti-colonization argument against any first world country. And if the ends justify the means, and you can create this anarchy and chaos and everything that we saw play out in Israel, if they can get away with that in a country that is one of the most secure countries on planet Earth, compulsory military service, all of that, if they can get away with it there, they will do it all over the planet, and they will believe that they're justified.
John, who said they can get away with it? What I'm saying is, we, meaning the U.S., the American taxpayer, gives billions of dollars year after year. And I'm going to tell you this for real. I know someone who just came back, an FBI person who just came back from Israel, who told me, I think he said it like somewhat tongue-in-cheek. He said, and he was there for around, we're in 2023. He went there in 2016. He said the whole experience completely radicalized him. And what he meant was that the way that Israelis just demand everything of the U.S., they just come up and say, we need more money for this, and you've got to give us this. Okay, all I'm saying is, you're given the money. No one's saying let this happen. I think that the rational position is, okay, this happened to you and it sucks and it's really bad. Take care of it. But I don't know what it's supposed to be like. My big concern and my big worry. No, you're given this money to take care of those things. And if you're going to reign and wreak havoc on these people as retaliation, do it. And it sounds like, what I've heard and what I've read the New York Times today, and it sounds like that Israel's really paying it back. Go ahead. But I don't know why it's like, we can't let them do that. What does it mean to let them do it? No, you're giving money to make sure they don't do it. And you're giving money to make sure that this doesn't happen like worse than it actually is, and to pay it back. So I don't know. You might be coming at it from a different position. It just sounds like everyone wants me to worry about this as an American. And I'm just thinking, all right, Israel, you've been set up to respond to this. Why is it now like you're making it sound like it's still my worry when you've been given every resource in the world to like respond to this?
Well, to that point, and this is something that's not just evident in Israel, it's evident here too. We spend a fortune on our intelligence agencies, so they're supposed to figure these things out before they happen, and yet they constantly miss the big ones. Our intelligence agencies, for example, missed the fall of the Egyptian government. We have a massive operation over there. We spend a lot of money to understand what's going on the ground in places like Egypt, and we were absolutely caught flat-footed with that. We were caught flat-footed on 9/11. We were caught flat-footed on any number of subjects. And part of it, I think, and I don't know what's going on over there, but over here, part of the problem with our intelligence agencies and why I think they're falling flat is that they've been politicized. And they spend a lot of their time and resources going after the Russiagate conspiracy and things along those lines, but they drop the ball with the fundamental duties of what they're supposed to do, which is to find information that's relevant for us. So before something like this happens, we know about it and we can stop it. But it seems like they're more interested in the politics and less interested in that sort of thing.
Oh, for sure. And I think this is one more notch in the belt for the experts. It's all, like, God, for the last 4 or 5 years, they've been told, listen to the experts. It's what even you go back to the Iraq war. So now we're looking at 20 years back. The expert, this is what the experts say. This is what the intelligence says. Okay, I think we've got enough on the record to say they're full of BS. They don't know what they portray to know. So where are we left? I mean, that's your guess is as good as mine. But I will say, just like, if you're just strictly talking about Israel, okay, handle it. You've been given every tool we've got. You've been given money, handfuls of cash from the U.S. taxpayer to Israel for years and years and years. Okay, time for you to handle that. And I understand that might involve, let's say, that entangles Saudi Arabia, that entangles Iran. Okay, then yes, we can talk about those things. But until then, deal with the issue. And I'm just tired of everyone's problem, because including with we're going to talk about Ukraine right now for a second. Every liberal Democrat expert who goes on TV says we should think about Ukraine like they're Israel. And what they're saying is we should give them welfare and everything they ask for until the end of time. And I'm sorry, I think that the American taxpayers look at that and say, okay, we give them billions. Their leaders live off the hog. They get money. I think that there was a story in I forget where it was, but about Ukraine's Zelensky's wife, going on $1 million fashion, where she spent about $1 million on clothing. Everyone here is thinking, what happens to us? When do we get anything out of this? And I understand the strategic theories behind this, and yet it's if with regard to Israel, it's if we're going to give you money year after year after year, what was it for if you expect us to take the wheel at this point?
What do you make of the argument that if Trump was in office, this would not be happening? Do you think that they pay close attention to what's going on here before they act, or do you think Hamas is just going to do what they're going to do and they don't care who's the president?
I think that there's to the degree that there's anything that they say, well, we're just going to do what we're going to do. I guess who could prove what? What I know for sure, I can tell you 100% sure, if Trump was in office, the Ukraine stuff that never happened. And I say that I've written this at the Federalist where I work, and I wrote that based on the New York Times' own reporting. I listened to the Daily Podcast, which is produced by the New York Times. Their own reporters were saying, look, NATO became a problem for Russia. That predates Trump even. That predates this podcast. But they were saying, you know what, NATO became a problem for Vladimir Putin, and they did not want to see an expansion of NATO. That Russia knew that they could rely on Trump we're not going to expand NATO with Ukraine. And then when someone else comes in office, and which was Biden, and he says, we want Ukraine in NATO, and in fact, we're gonna we're fully behind this whole thing. And then you have Ukraine, you have Zelensky, who gets a little bit mouthy and decides he's going to put sanctions on Vladimir Putin's people. I'm not making this up. Anyone who's listening, go listen to the podcast. Go listen to the podcast from the Daily Podcast. This is from the New York Times. When he says, he put sanctions on people who were friends with Vladimir Putin, then that's when there's finally time. It was escalated enough to where he moved in. So, yeah, it's true for sure that if Trump was in office, or if someone who wasn't absolutely effing insane like Biden is, who thinks he can just throw his balls around everywhere, we wouldn't be in this position. I think take Trump out of the equation. We would still not be in this position if it weren't for someone like Biden coming in and absolutely ruining everything.
What do you think? You mentioned Ukraine. What do you think is going to happen to Ukrainian funding with the speakership currently not being filled? Because if Jim Jordan gets in, although he voted with McCarthy and did not vote to vacate the speakership, is certainly politically to the right of where Kevin McCarthy was. And I would imagine he's to the right of him on Ukraine. What do you think a Speaker Jim Jordan would do to the budget regarding Ukraine?
It's a really good question, and I say that because, one, my impulse is to say, oh, it's gone. It's dried up. It's done. And yet, you can, if there's one thing every single one of your listeners can count on, it is for Republicans to completely poop the bed on any promise they've ever made, anything. So I think that there will be some funding. There will be some amounts of funding. I think it'll be far less. Which, I mean, we're going in the right direction. Don't want to offend anybody, but I think we're going in the right direction. But if it was for real, you would say, because really what it takes is the next speaker needs to sit down with the president and say, you are going to Zelensky and you are going to tell him, draw this down right now, and we're not giving you a single cent unless you can come up with a peace deal. That's what the next speaker has to do. Whether they're going to do that, I don't know, because again, you look at any Republican speaker, whether it's Jim Jordan, you could put Matt Gaetz in that position, and I still think that there would be like this waffling on, well, we've got to give them a blah 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 blah. You might see that, but really, what it's going to take is there's going to have to be a speaker who meets with the president face to face, sits at a table, and says, no more money unless you tell Zelensky what's the peace deal. What's the peace deal, and draw it up right now, and it needs to be done within 2 days.
Last question before you go. The former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, who, of course, is a representative from here in California, was in Los Angeles last week appearing at an event with Karen Bass. And when she's in town here or wherever it is that she goes in front of Democratic audiences, they treat her like a queen. They treat her like she's a monarch. They treat her like she's royalty. And typically, for whatever reason, Democratic voters, Democratic members, they all seem to like their leaders. They seem to respect them, to revere them. And on the opposite side, Republicans can't stand their leaders. They couldn't stand Paul Ryan. They couldn't stand John Boehner. They don't like Mitch McConnell. They kicked Kevin McCarthy out. Why is it, do you think, that Democrats seem to always like their congressional leaders and Republicans always despise theirs?
It's very simple. Actually, it's written in my book, Liberal Misery. I wish I would have gone deeper into this, but I didn't. Maybe that's a different book for a different day. But Democrats, liberals, the committed, the diehards, which is basically all of them, they have their eye on the ball. They know that our leader is our tool, and we're going to go and we're going to drive that ball forward, whatever it takes. Maybe I don't like the way that they tweet. Maybe I don't like the way they sip their drink. Whatever it is, we're going forward. Republicans say, I don't like the tweets. I don't like, maybe they're not the right crowd. Maybe they rub me the wrong way a little bit. So maybe we'll get somebody else. And even if we don't get someone else, at least we got rid of him. I hate how simplistic that sounds, but that just is the bottom line. Democrats, they've got their eye on the ball. Republicans say, I'd rather be left alone and go to Outback and have a nice steak. Well, let me tell you something, Republicans. You're not going to have a nice steak when they replace everything with soil food and berries and leaves and all that.
Well, you're also not going to have a nice steak at Outback.
That's not true. That's not true, John. You can. Well, I mean, maybe where you are, and actually now where I am, they're not even that good anymore. You might be right. You might be right.
Eddie Scarry, he's a columnist at The Federalist, and if you want to read more about the topic that we just talked about, you can do so if you get his book, Liberal Misery, available online at Amazon.com. You can follow Eddie on Twitter at eScary. Eddie Scarry, thanks so much for stopping by today. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, if you want to listen to the show and it's not between the hours of noon and 3, there's a handy-dandy new app that'll help you do that quite easily.
That's right. Just go search in the Apple App Store or the Android Store for the KABC app. You can search KABC AM. It'll pop up. It's the best way to download a app that lets you listen live to this show and this station whenever and wherever you want, because the AM signal really only goes so far. And it has all the podcasts of this show. Easy to use with CarPlay. It's fantastic. So many people are able to use this. I bet you could figure out how to use it too, except for Barbara Ferrer, because you know why.
I have tech issues.
We're going through the sound of L.A. Mayor Karen Bass's sit-down with ABC 7's Mark Brown.
Now, John, one issue that got a lot of our listeners all the way pissed off last week was the fact that Karen Bass sent a letter to the infrastructure czar himself, Transportation Secretary Mayor Pete Buttigieg, that she wants to study demolishing the 90 freeway because we need more housing.
Oh, yes, that great idea.
Mark Brown brought it up, and Karen Bass tried to do the back-away boogaloo.
Let's get to another a question from a viewer. This is from Richard from Playa del Rey. You want to demolish the 90 freeway, an important interconnecting freeway to the 405.
Except you sent the letter saying you do.
Yeah, you were the one that did that.
You said, I fully endorse what Streets for All wants to do. And what Streets for All wants to do is demolish all the freeways.
Freeway to the 405 and build a park and low-income housing. If you are successful, how do daily commuters from the beach access the 405?
Well, let me tell you, I am one of those riders on the 405 and the 91 freeway.
90 freeway. 91's down in Riverside. But close enough.
I think a portion of it goes to the South Bay, doesn't it?
5 and the 91 freeway to get to the beach. So I am not suggesting that at all.
Okay.
But what the viewer is talking about is a letter that was submitted by my office that called for a study only.
No, she's not saying it. I sent a letter. It was my office, even though she signed it.
Why would you even greenlight a study for something as dumb as that?
I don't want to demolish the freeway. I want to study if we should demolish the freeway. That's not a good enough answer for me.
That was submitted by my office that called for a study only. So we are not calling to demolish the freeway at all. How would I get to the beach?
What would you like to do with that stretch, though?
Well, it's a question of studying to see if anything is viable at all. It might be building housing near the freeway, and that might be it.
Okay. All right. That's Richard. We hope your question has been answered.
Here's what happened. She was down with the study that the people who wanted to turn it into homeless housing wanted. She didn't think she'd get any blowback because who could object to a study? Everyone knows these things take years. Everyone knows that we rarely act on these studies. Who cares? I'm just throwing a bone to people who endorsed me when I ran for mayor. But then word leaked out, and she freaked out, and now they're going under the bus.
Well, and it's just super insulting. The money that's in the infrastructure bill to build roads and bridges, she wanted the Mayor Pete to use millions of dollars to study getting rid of a road, getting rid of a bridge.
That's right. And the money will go to this useless study that she, by her own admission, plans on doing nothing with in terms of putting homeless housing on the freeway. And that's money that could go to making LAX look like something other than a FEMA camp.
Let's hear what Karen Bass has to say about her colleagues on the crooked LA City Council.
Since the last time you and I spoke, City Councilman Mark Ridley Thomas was convicted.
That's one.
Check.
Yes.
City Council Member Curran Price was indicted.
Yep.
Check.
And now we've got City Council Member John Lee, who's under an ethical cloud, being accused of some violations of city ethics rules.
Hadn't heard about
Applejack.
that one yet.
Oh, yeah, that came out over the weekend. His name was all over the Mitch Englander report.
Well, he was on that Vegas trip.
That's right. And I think he received some gifts from the same person that was allegedly trying to get favors from Mitch Englander.
At this point, there's only one member of that entire city council that is somewhat trustworthy, and that's Tracy Park. And she's brand new.
1 out of 15.
What is going on with the City Council? You don't, they're elected at large, but you as mayor, what can and should you do in terms of addressing what appears to be some real problems with corruption at City?
Yeah, and let me just tell you that the biggest concern I have is that people, Angelinos, have to have faith in our government. And when things like that happen, it compromises their ability to have faith in government, even though each case is different. All of the cases happened before I got there. But it's...
Yes, in fact, when you were running for mayor, Mark Ridley Thomas was endorsing you.
And didn't she get the same degree that he was looking for his kid?
Well, yes, she did. She also got the honor. Well, she got an honorary degree from the same school of social work that was busted because Mark Ridley Thomas tried to use them to wire money to his no good kid.
But it's important that I maintain a very high standard, and I'm definitely trying to do that. So one of the things I said I was going to do was bring in President Obama's ethics czar. You know, President Obama went 8 years without any investigations, any controversy, and so he came in. His name is Mr. Norma Eisen. He came in and did a top-to-bottom review of the mayor's office and set certain standards in place. And one of the things he suggested that we do, which we did, was hire a full-time lawyer to do nothing but focus on ethics and ethics compliance.
That lawyer is going to be billing a lot of hours.
And what did this ethics czar say about you accepting a master's degree from USC from a woman who pleaded guilty to crimes regarding corruption?
No! Within the mayor's office. And some of it is difficult because there's so many different rules and regulations, many that are foreign to me because most of it didn't apply on a federal level or a state level. But we are working at it.
All right.
That means she's not going to do anything about the corrupt city council.
No, but she's on it, though, Randy.
She's on it.
We're going through the sound of L.A. Mayor Karen Bass's sit-down with ABC 7's Mark Brown.
Not only is Karen Bass the mayor, she's also the chair of Metro, so let's talk about that stabby train.
All right, and Emilio from Los Angeles asking, I ride the red line to school most days of the week. What are you going to do to clean it up and make it safe in your capacity as a member of the board of directors of Metro Los Angeles?
Yes, I took on chairing the board, and I hope that Emilio sees some improvement because from when I started on the board in January...
I love that she's immediately assuming that he's in ICU. You ride the train every day, huh, Emilio? Well, I hope your situation improves. Maybe we can stabilize you and send you back to general population.
I hope that Emilio sees some improvement because from when I started on the board in January to now, the red line has improved significantly. So we have board meetings every month.
Wait, define significantly, because in that timeline between January and now, a police officer got his finger bitten off on the red line.
Every day it seems like there's a new story of some kind of depravity going on that train.
From when I started on the board in January to now, the red line has improved significantly. So we have board meetings every month, and we get reports on crime every single month. I have ridden the red line. It's cleaned up a lot. And so I'm hoping that it continues to get better.
I'm not buying that at all.
No, and this guy rides the red line to school every single day. He's not a politician who shows up with 400 security guards and staffers and rides it once in a blue moon. And he sent the email in that particular day saying it's dirty and it's unsafe. And she's saying, oh, no, sir, you're wrong. I fixed that. It's fine.
It was dirtier last year.
Another satisfied customer.